I'm looking for it, like, I don't see it. It's not there.
The mic does pick you up, so anything you do say, it will hear you now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so I'll put that. Just so people can see it. I almost feel like we should have background music in here.
Right.
Although that doesn't really work well for the recording aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One more place and then I'll hand it over to you.
My shirt as well.
Okay. There you are. Oh yeah, you have to take the thing. I guess that's the downside of using your, like camera phones.
Oh,
and
so
your
you
iPad
actually
and stuff.
live cast from the phone?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's a switcher app, and so basically, this is the iPad itself is the hub, and then like everything from the cameras that connects to them over the Wi-Fi, and then feeds everything back into that, and then it like puts it all together for you. So there's like less editing and stuff if you don't necessarily like want to do all that. So it's kind of cool. There's see, I'm really like trying to dive into technology a little bit more, like in this realm of podcasting. You kind of have to, I guess. And I found that I was not very good at it at first, but I'm slowly learning, right?
Are you ready for me to play the intro?
Yeah, go ahead. Are you trying to navigate this crazy thing called life? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Unraveling with Rayne. Hey guys, so today I'm here with Henry Hopscotch, co-founder and editor of Tumbleweird, and we're going to get to sit down with him and talk a little bit about his journey in creating this really cool magazine. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 35. For the last 18 months or so, Tumbleweird been kind of my main project.
Mm-hmm.
I have a fiance, a couple cats, live in Pasco.
Nice.
I work in the healthcare industry doing really boring stuff, staring at a computer most of the day.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's fun to escape to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
The part of my job involves creating forms, and it was getting involved with that layout software that made me want to do more, and sort of is why I got into this in the first place.
Yeah. Very cool. So take me back to like before Tumbleweird and before like all of that started. Like what kind of set you on that path to creating this?
I grew up in Pasco, and I was always very into computers. When I was 11, I had a BBS. You're a bit younger, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Way back in the early 90s, we didn't have the internet really.
Yeah.
We had bulletin board systems, and you would load up a terminal program in your computer. Like I had a 486, a 66 megahertz computer, and you would dial out to local bulletin boards.
Okay.
And it was all text interface, but it was multicolored, and you had these ASCII characters that could kind of draw blocky pictures and stuff. So I had a BBS called the Wizard's Tower for a while, and eventually I went to school for computer science, and then decided I didn't want to do that, and I went to school for network administration briefly. Well, I got my AA in network admin, and then
If you don't mind me asking, what deterred you from computer science?
I had a very bad experience at university.
Oh, okay.
When I was younger, I was very, very overweight and very, very depressed,
Oh, yeah.
and completely abhorred the idea of doing anything to acknowledge it or treat it. And so when I was at university, I just became a complete recluse, and basically never left my room except to get food.
Sure.
And it was really terrible, and I didn't go back after that first semester.
I don't blame you. That does not sound like a fun experience.
Yeah, well, it was, mostly my own fault, so.
Well,
But,
yeah, I guess we gotta, look at things in a certain way to kind of move forward from those. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. So then, anyway, what did you do after computer science, or you turned away from that?
Yeah, well, for a few years, I didn't do a whole lot. I worked, my first job was in a book and game store in the mall, Uncle's Games. Oh no, that's okay. So back around 2000, this was a store that was in the mall, and it was pretty neat because I got to work with a guy I knew from. He did miniatures wargaming.
Okay.
There used to be sort of a board game club based in Kennewick, and this is so many years ago, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but he was my manager at the store, and anyway, that was my first job, and then I did real estate photography for a while, because they would need to do comparisons, and of course this was long before Google Street View, so all you would have is this address, and they had an office, I think, in Moses Lake, and they would send me out to weird addresses just all over eastern Washington to take very detailed pictures of places, and it was a good job for a young person, because you'd have to people don't like you taking pictures of their property.
Yeah.
It's
causes some suspicion.
Yeah, it's technically allowed, but
yeah.
So I did that for quite a while, and eventually I went back to school, and just to Columbia Basin College here, and did that for a while. Started working on my MCSE. It's I don't even know if people do it anymore, but back then it was Microsoft's Certified Systems Engineer, and it was what you did if you wanted to fix computers in a sort of like an IT department or something.
Oh,
like
okay.
that. And I got part of my certification done and gave up on it, and but around that time I was doing odd jobs with computers all over the place. There were like a couple dozen people just locally, mostly like friends of friends and people's parents and aunts who'd heard that, oh, here's a kid that knows computers.
Right, that's how it always was. Oh,
yeah. So I'd build computers for people and mostly repair them and clean up horrible virus infections. And
did you like that work?
Yeah, that was it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and that's how I got into my job originally, was doing this computer stuff. I did the IT and that kind of stuff, and then the payroll system started becoming computerized, and I helped them set that up, and then eventually they needed somebody to help do. I just kind of gradually ended up doing more and more there, until I was just there full time. Yeah. And then it's just sort of continued on that way. That's still what I do today.
Right. That's good. Yeah. That's really cool how it just kind of progressed and you found your spot there.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Perfect. So then how did Tumbleweird even come to be? Like, where did this concept come from? Like, what sparked that idea?
Okay, so the original idea is my friend Logan's.
Okay.
He had an idea for a zine. We don't call it a magazine. It is. I guess now it's kind of turning into something a little bit different, but
Everything's always evolving.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When it started, it was in no way professional. I brought this is our third issue. This is how the zine used to be printed.
Yeah.
And you can see it's just copy paper folded in half and stapled.
Right.
We used to get it printed over at B&B Express Printing by the Flash Cube building. And today we have it printed by a company that does real newspapers. It's the same company that publishes or prints the Stranger and the Tri-City Herald, actually.
Okay.
And we just ended up kind of going that way for cost reasons, and it let us do color,
Sure,
which was a real nice change.
Definitely.
Oh, but sorry, getting back to your original question. The zine was Logan's idea.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Adventures Underground?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the store that Logan helped start.
Okay.
He and his now ex-wife Amanda started that back in I think 2007 or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I love that place.
No, good. Logan's a weird guy.
The best people are.
Yeah, yeah. He's he was an art student, and ended up. I think the way it's. I don't want to misrepresent.
No, you're fine.
I think the way that he got started was that he and his brother were selling. I think it was him and his brother. They were selling books, and they started selling them. I think they might have started out on eBay or something like that, some platform, and then they started just selling them online on their own website. And then when he married Amanda, that kind of developed. And I think they were doing that for a few years, maybe more than that. Maybe anyway, they were doing it for a while, and then eventually they ended up with this warehouse of books, because way back at the beginning they would go to garage sales, and people would be selling just boxes and boxes of old paperbacks, and they'd just buy them all cheap, and then I think they would record the ISBN numbers and collect all the information and put that together and put it online for sale for some amount more, and then but eventually their collection of books got really big, and they had this warehouse, and then at some point it just made sense for them to open a brick and mortar store. Yeah. I'm probably getting a lot of crucial details wrong. They can tell you the correct story, but
that's the gist of it, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if for anybody that doesn't know Adventures Underground, it is a gigantic book and game store, and now coffee house, cafe thing, and record store also, and they have just tons and tons of board games, and they've got a gaming room in the back where Magic players meet and stuff, and it's actually, I think that's how I met Logan. Was I met him back when he was opening his store, because a friend of mine who I actually worked with had met Logan, because I think back then he worked at Octopus Gardens, and they're both in the Uptown. They're real close to each other. And then we hung out there a couple times, and we played board games together after the store had closed. And then a Dungeons and Dragons game got started. Yeah. And the house where we would play was just across the street from Adventures. There's a park, and it was on the other side of the park. And sorry, I think I've gotten terribly off track.
Go on, go ahead.
Anyway,
so you guys are kind of collaborating and getting to know each other at that time, right? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay.
So. I knew Logan through Dungeons and Dragons mainly, and I don't know, we've hung out ever since then, and we used to do this thing where we would, I still do every once in a while, but not so much, because we would get together on Sundays and do like collaborative art projects and stuff. You ever play this game where you draw something? We would do it with a timer, a chess clock or something. You draw something, timer goes off, you trade papers with your friend and continue drawing on theirs.
Yeah.
We do that a whole bunch.
Nice.
And we played Magic the Gathering and stuff like that together.
Yeah.
And we would just BS about things, and he talked about this idea that he had for a zine, and he had, I think maybe the first thing he came up with was the name, which I think it is a very good name.
Is it the original name? That was the first one that he thought of?
Yep. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he came up with that, and this is how it used to be printed. That was our logo for a long time. My grandmother, who's 81, drew that. She does calligraphy, and she made that for us.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You don't see many people that can do that.
Yeah.
So cool. Well, it's I guess I just find it so crazy that it's the first name. Like that's just what he knew it was going to be. Because usually you have this idea and you're like, what am I going to call this? Like, what is this? Like, you know what I mean? So that's really cool how it came out that way.
Yeah. It was originally just a little underground subversive thing, and I think the name kind of helped because it gave us something to organize around.
Yeah.
And he was the editor at the start. He up until summer of last year, and then that's when I took over, and things have really developed since then. We now have an editorial board with 5 people on it, and we diversified ownership. We turned the whole thing into we were going to incorporate it as a 501c3, but as it turns out, you're not allowed to engage in political speech as a 501c3.
Oh,
And
okay.
I had experience with I had formed an LLC before, and that's what I knew.
Sure.
So since we couldn't be just a real nonprofit, what I thought of as a real nonprofit, we incorporated as an LLC back in February of 2017.
Nice.
Yeah, and initially we just had an operating agreement that I basically cribbed from another company that I had set up for someone. Knowing computers when I did was a dangerous thing because it meant that you ended up doing a lot of bureaucratic stuff, and now that's my life.
Yeah.
But we incorporated and had this operating agreement, and then at some point sorry, I'm very awkward and I pause in inconvenient places.
You're fine. I'm right there with you.
At some point, Logan became a defaulting member, and that's when you're not meeting certain obligations set forth in your operating agreement. Then there's this whole procedure that you have to follow, and basically involves someone buying the other one out and it turning into a single owner thing.
Okay.
And I didn't want to do that. And Logan hates bureaucracy, and I'm very, very used to it. So
It sounds like you guys were a perfect balance in that that moment. Yeah.
Yes, we're very much complementary, like colors, blue and yellow. You know, he's very blue sky thinking, idea man. As he's fond of saying, he's like his greatest passion is coming up with business ideas doomed to failure.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of this is very obscure, but there's this game of self-amendment called nomic. So nomic was it was created by this law professor Peter Suber, and it was I think it was supposed to be a simulation for his students of the first constitutional convention. I think this is when all the heads of the colonies, back the 13 colonies, when they were all getting together and they didn't really have a good way of agreeing how to work with each other, and they had to come up with the simplest rule set possible, basically to just to
Jive.
not have everyone yelling over each other.
Yeah.
So that's what nomic is Peter Suber made this is written in it's agnostic with regards to the subject matter, whereas the Constitutional Convention, they were trying to do something, they had a very clear goal and parameters. Nomic is like that, but with the entire point of it taken away.
Okay.
So it's just a rule set for doing something. At the start of it, it's a game, and the goal is to get 100 points, and you get points by amending the rules of the game. But the rules of the game are the same game that you're playing, so you can change the rules and it can become literally anything.
Okay.
And so it's actually a really good framework for if you want to run a company or any kind of a group where you're trying to build consensus, and so that's why I used it, because this is another thing that I used to enjoy doing, was playing nomic online with people.
Yeah.
And anyway, we developed it into this great big rule set that sort of encompasses a lot of the basics of parliamentary procedure. So the stuff that we do resembles what you would do in a meeting organized according to Robert's Rules of Order. But it's really different. This is the rule set.
Okay.
And it incorporates a whole bunch of things, and now it's kind of interesting because it's also a historical document, because you can trace back the amendments and see where things started and where they are now, and it has an entire section that's non-binding, that's just sort of like our ideals and mission statement type stuff. And oh boy, I'm sorry,
No.
I think I've gotten really off track.
You're fine. This is such an interesting way to run things, so I'm really curious, because getting everybody's perspective and take on how they handle certain things is really cool to see, because everybody does it a little bit different. So
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this process. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, good. So what we did was we amended our operating agreement. We adopted an amendment that basically said the rules of Tumblenomic supersede everything in the operating agreement. Where the rules of Tumblenomic are silent, the operating agreement governs, and then it's just kind of gone on from there. And see, if Logan were here, he'd be talking about entirely different things. This is what excites me is the procedure and agreements, and I really like when things are clearly defined, and so that's what this is all about. And it's how we moved forward, because then we didn't have to do this whole terrible process that was in the operating agreement. Instead, we just started running things according to this, and I wrote it up over the course of about a month. And in October, we adopted the amendment, and the thing that everyone hates is that it requires monthly meetings.
Gosh darn it! No.
We lost one of our board members over that. Actually, our horoscopist, Dinah Takedov, pseudonym, but she would not. She told me meetings are a tool of oppression. And she would not attend meetings, but she designated Logan her proxy for a while. Anyway.
Everybody has their boundaries.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. And anyway, this is how we're running it still today. We've had monthly meetings ever since October, and this really cool guy who's been writing columns for us since almost the beginning, Ted Miller. He joined our board in I think in maybe like November or something like that. I'm not good with details. And he's been really helpful. Kind of when you actually diversify management of something and have a committee, people hate committees and bureaucracy, but it keeps people on track, and
Yeah.
if you don't do that, if your principal members lose motivation, the whole thing just falls apart. But if you have a set of procedures and rules and obligations, then keeps chugging along. And that's what we wanted to do with Tumbleweird.
Yeah.
Wanted to make sure that it would continue. I think around somewhere around issue 6, like we started like, hey, this is really great, but it's an incredible amount of work.
Yeah.
For something as small as this, you would
Right.
probably not think it would be that much
Sure.
work, but there's all this, you have to coordinate with everybody who's contributing content, and that alone is like an entire job.
Do you think that this format would work with a lot of businesses or
Oh,
groups
yeah.
of people or like nonprofits? Because I know that you're talking about how you tried to go in that direction as far as with the zine, and so do you think that this would fit that for most people and
Oh yeah,
what they're doing?
It's a really cool framework because the initial game, all it is at the start is a system basically for voting, for clarifying that rules can't contradict themselves, and if they do, here's how you sort it out. And if people can't agree on how the rules are to be interpreted, here's a system for appointing a judge who can make that call. And like in ours, for example, if anybody disagrees with how the rules are being carried out, they can go through it, they can invoke judgment, and when you invoke judgment, everything grinds to a halt, and you can't hold any plebiscites or votes, and every member in a certain order is given the opportunity to donate $500 to the company for the purpose of engaging a licensed mediator, and then theoretically we have the mediator come in and read all this and decide what needs to be done.
Well, the reason I ask is because, and this isn't something that I actually have really talked a whole lot about yet, so through the process of like creating this space and this podcast and like really trying to venture out into the community and talk to different people and the things that they're working on is basically to get a better understanding of how our community works and how we kind of like work together, and like we had kind of talked about before, just like bringing to light things that are kind of still hidden, but they're, you know what I mean, those things that we want to like keep bringing out in our community. And like part of the reason that I really wanted to do that is because I'm gonna get emotional talking about it, but so I have a child that has some medical needs and some issues, and it's all in like the digestive side, and so there's not a whole lot of like pediatric digestion research going on. And so like my husband and I have thrown around this idea of like trying to start like a nonprofit to like fund researching and stuff for that. And so I guess I'm sitting on this like project idea, and as you're talking about like the framework and how you would mitigate that, like I wouldn't have even like thought about, oh, maybe I should think about that, like formulating this new group of people, so that's really cool that you brought that to the table, and how it like just fits right in with what like we're both working on. That's so cool. Thank you.
I don't know if you'd want to. Nomic's a lot of work, and I enjoy this stuff. So I don't know. You could totally do it this way. We just kind of bootstrapped it into running I guess a company. It's more an organization. It's not designed to generate profit. But going back to what you said about the community, that was kind of our main thing at the start, was that the Tri-Cities is kind of on a national scale. It's known for like being a nuclear waste dump and having homophobic florists and just not great things. And a lot of people from around the little outside the region maybe tend to think of it as an extremely conservative area, and it probably is one of the maybe the most conservative area in Washington.
Right.
But there's this entire other side to it, and we feel it doesn't get the attention that it needs. It makes things like this podcast incredibly, I think, vital for it, because I think the Tri-Cities is hitting this tipping point where it's not supported just by some great big government project. There's enough people just in one place now that it kind of becomes its own sustaining metropolitan area. And
I agree.
Yeah, and it's a lot more diverse than a lot of people think. And so we try and highlight that with the zine, focusing on I refer to them as benign subcultures, but that's like such a clinical
terminology.
Potheads, furries, juggalos, SCA members, Society for Creative Anachronisms, people, this kind of thing. Radcon's going on right now, and this is the Tri-Cities that we knew, and wanted to kind of make it more visible, and there wasn't anyone doing exactly this at the time, so.
So tell me a little bit about the process of how like stuff gets decided on to be in the zine itself. Like, what is that process like? Like, do you have like exclusive writers, or do you kind of like dabble in other people's work, or how does
we have a few exclusive writers. Virtually no one gets compensated for anything they do. We syndicate a couple little things. One of the things that we syndicate, the very first thing that we ever started syndicating was Savage Love, which is Dan Savage's sex advice column, and we liked that not for it being like titillating or anything, but because it was sex positive, and it exposed people to alternative lifestyle. It's not a good term, alternative lifestyles, but this entire spectrum of atypical things,
just diversity,
LGBTQIA and polyamory and this kind of stuff, and I'm gay, Logan's not, that was something that we thought needed to be touched on here, especially with the whole florist thing. That really bugged me that we were in the spotlight for a little while because of that, and that place is still open and thriving. But it, in a way, it was kind of good because it's sparked a lot of stuff like this.
Kind of brought awareness to that, I think. So like for the other side though, like, hey, this is happening here. Like, we need to maybe like speak up a little bit more. You know what I mean?
The same things gets repeated so often, but like, one of the silver linings of Donald Trump getting elected is that it really kind of galvanized people for the stuff that I don't know. I don't mean to get political or anything. But we do call this your local liberal rag. As far as how things actually end up in it, Ted always writes our Ted's Head column, and addresses things like racism, and I think oh boy. It's I can scarcely remember. I'm sorry, it's terrible.
You're fine.
We've got a few regular writers right now. Dara Quinn, who she operates the Emerald of Siam. She does a column. It's not every month, but it's pretty often. And then Ginger Wireman, who ran for Richland City Council, she does a column on. It's always kind of like urban planning related stuff, because that's something that's like Tri-Cities is great in a lot of ways, and I'm all for cheering it on. But one thing that we do have a problem with is like transportation, friendliness to bicycles and pedestrians, especially. There's a lot of places where to get from one spot to another, you have to walk alongside a highway if you want to be a pedestrian.
I think that just like really comes down to it kind of progressing so quick. You know, like I feel like that aspect really has to catch up quick too, like because you're right. You're totally right in that aspect.
And the stuff that she's been doing with that is really helpful. Like she has a Google map where you can go and like point out problem areas, and I think it's all with the aim of eventually getting the cities to start to address this stuff. I mean, you know, I live in Pasco, and there's a ton of areas around me where there's people out walking all the time, and there's no sidewalks, you know, and there's not a whole bunch of street lights and stuff like that.
Yeah, because we live up off we are in Kennewick, and we live off of the top part of Olympia, and like when we first moved in, I don't know, 6 years ago now, like you had to like go across the street to get to sidewalk, and then back across the street to get to the other half of the sidewalk. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to take all of my kids and like walk them safely if I'm having to like cross the street to get across? Like, it just didn't make sense. I'm like, we're gonna walk in the gravel. Come on. So yeah, but that's really cool that she had you said it's a Google map that you can go on and do that, or is she
I there's probably I'm not sure what the term is, but it's like a collaborative map where anybody can go into it and like draw lines on things and add little annotations and markup. And
that's really cool.
Yeah.
And then so who else do you have writing for you currently?
Oh boy, I'm probably going to leave someone out, and
that's
I don't
okay.
mean to.
No, pop quiz.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
Charles Hubbard. He's a local middle school teacher. He writes a column called My Humble Opinion, and it's about a very wide array of things. I remember this last month he did one on dieting, and I think I've said I have a really terrible memory. Part of the reason I like bureaucracy so much is that I've gotten very good at augmenting my memory with things. Do you know what Evernote is? It's a cloud database thing, and you can save stuff there. My entire everything is in Evernote, but it's all available at I can search anything instantly. And
I've got a really like old school version of that. No, with tabs to go through and find everything. No, but I understand that, because sometimes I feel like we're trying to absorb so much so fast that there's just no way. You're just like, okay.
Well, it's kind of morbid, but I also view it as training for senility. Like when I think if you develop habits when you're young that help you function better when you're elderly, you'll have much better time, and you can. You know, there's people who are 100. I don't think that's
morbid at all. I think that is really smart. That's a fantastic idea to keep in mind.
Yeah, I've been in assisted care facilities, and there are some old people that are just so sour and unhappy, and I really don't want that to be me. So I try and my hope is that by augmenting my memory and stuff with these tools, that I can function at a higher level for a longer time. I don't know why I think I'm going to get dementia. I just feel like it's inevitable. If you live long enough, you'll lose your mind a bit. Yeah. Even though, anyway. Oh boy, what were we talking about?
I think we were just talking about different people that are writing, but
I
think that's where we left off, was it? I don't know. Anyway.
We have a lot of writers who contribute regularly. There's there's a couple cartoonists that do things regularly for us. Logan draws cartoons. Nice. And then we've got a guy who uses a pseudonym, Carlos Hustle. He does little single panel cartoons and poetry.
Sure.
And then there's we've got this really great, very beautiful artistic comic that's drawn every month by a guy named Abbas Hussein, and it's called Strange Kingdom. And then, of course, Dinah does the horoscopes every month, and I do the crossword every month. My friend Ian, he does we have a board game column that he writes. There's a thing called the Columbia Basin Board Gaming Society, and he's involved with that, and they do sort of, their members get together and do convention-y things. They have their own little one, but I don't know that it's like opened up to other people so much yet. But they travel to these conventions, and I'm sure some of them are going to be at RadCon this weekend. Anywhere there's an opportunity to do that kind of gaming. Yeah. But we also have people that contribute like one-off things. And
what would it do? Do people just like send you stuff and be like, hey, do you like this? And do you want to use it, or is there like an official process?
Pretty much. We run this thing in the back of every issue. I guess it's moved around a bit. Now it's over here in every issue, but back in July it was over here, where we solicit content and we say, we're looking for contributors who want to write about local news and opinion, vegan, vegetarian cooking, local wine news and reviews, creative fiction and poetry, general nerdery, LGBTQ news and events, marijuana news and reviews, comics, business ideas doomed to failure, art and photography, concert previews and reviews, local food and restaurant spotlights. Nice. It's sort of a general catch-all. And if anyone listening is interested and they think that they'd like to participate, go to tumbleweird.org, and there's a link that says submit something, and that's our submissions guide. It's super easy. You just like type it up or take a photo of it, whatever it is, and email it to editor@tumbleweird.org. It's very simple. Nice. Yeah. Perfect. I'm sure that it would be hard to figure out like a general like theme for a zine. I don't know if you guys it sounds like you've got a lot of different things going into one. Like, how do you mesh that? Like, I know that there's a flow and there's a layout and there's like the aesthetics of it too. Like, how do you guys map that out, or does there somebody specifically that does all that? There's no plan. No? No, it's really amazing. Not to toot my own horn, but I think I'm okay at layout, and I'm good enough that I can make it look like a professional thing. That was my goal at the beginning, was when I was making it this way, and it's a 2-column format. What I was doing here was aping scientific journals, because I really like the way that looks. Yeah. Yeah, and so anyway, it gives the illusion that we know what we're doing, but we don't. Everything that's in there now, it just kind of we plunk it somewhere at random, and then it just sort of stays there through inertia. And as other stuff comes in, if it's similar, we'll kind of wedge it in next to it, and then over time it becomes more and more cohesive. So now it's now things are kind of very formulaically. Editorial, table of contents, and about our cover on page 2, horoscopes on page 3. Page 4 is Play This Game by Ian, and then One Move Ahead by Shane Seraphin, who he's involved with the chess club that meets at Adventures Underground, and it's a chess puzzle column. And then page 5 is the crossword, and it ends up being a full page because it's what I do. So. Crossword. And then 6 and 7 kind of end up being just like random local art and comics, because those are our color pages. But the whole thing's not color. It's we only have 8 pages of color, and then 8 and 9 is where it starts to get kind of gray. We have like the top 10 most pirated movies of the week is a feature that we run, and that's there's a guy that runs a website, torrentfreak.com, and he actually is in the Netherlands, I believe. Oh, really? And they're all about like the copyleft movement, and Creative Commons and sharing information and that kind of thing, which we're really into. We run a little Creative Commons ad and everything.
Right.
And he let us run that feature. And then, and then the thing that's been in every issue since the very beginning is the where to find cannabis in the Tri-County area.
It's been in every single one?
Yeah. It might be the only thing that's been the same all the way through. But there was such an uproar when Green to Go opened, and a lot of people get real up in arms about that stuff, and there's some stuff that's been going on in West Richland where they've been trying to open one there, and
right.
The Franklin County commissioners, they banned recreational marijuana businesses in Franklin County back in 2015. So on the map every month, we run a little section for Franklin County that just says in brackets, sadly, Franklin County commissioners have chosen to ban.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's
and then,
funny.
of course, we have a mailing list and send out subscriptions, and we always send a complimentary subscription to the Board of Commissioners for Franklin County every month, hoping that they'll see this and rethink.
Yeah, let's
things.
talk about this.
Yeah,
Let's open those lines of communication again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm going to tell you something that went nowhere. So I would say probably almost 7 years ago now, I had this really ambitious idea that I was going to make a local parenting magazine, and it was going to be great, and I was going to get all these polls and talk to people and see what they wanted, because I was always into this communication thing. I knew that whatever it is that I was going to do, that had to do with communication and giving information and receiving information, right? So I had this crazy ambitious idea that I was going to put together this thing, right? And it was going to have a digital copy and eventually a printed copy, and I seriously got down to the process, everything was all written, and all of the articles were in place, as far as the writing aspect of it, and then I looked at the layout and I was like, I don't think I can do this. So I had one issue, and it was really clunky looking, and I was like, oh, well.
What was it called?
A Parent Life.
Oh.
Yeah.
A Parent Life? Not a Parent Life.
But it plays on a parent, this. These are the apparent things that in parenting that we miss. That was so apparent. Why didn't I think about that?
That's a funny coincidence. Have you heard of tailored living?
Yeah, I have. I haven't actually looked at it at all, but I've heard of it.
It's sort of a local lifestyle fashion kind of magazine.
Yeah.
So it touches on some of this parenting stuff. The title of that one is also a play on words, because they spell tailored weird, but it's the name of the lady who puts it together.
Nice. Yeah. So I was really interested on the layout aspect of it, because that's what really stumped me. I was like,
what software did you use?
Publisher.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just like, I guess we'll play around with this a little bit and see how it goes, and then new ideas, new ventures from there.
The learning curve on that layout software is so steep.
Yeah.
I really like making charts, and I made this really, really elaborate series of tables, tables within tables where you would roll dice and then they would direct you to other tables, and I put it all on this great big poster. It got so big and complicated that the vector art software that I was using to assemble it, because I would make the things in Excel, export to PDF, and then paste, it started choking on it. It couldn't handle all of it, and so I went and asked people on Metafilter, what do I do? Inkscape can't handle this. And someone turned me on to, I tried a few things, but eventually InDesign, Adobe InDesign.
Adobe products are always good, though.
That software is very, very complicated. It's very hard to learn. But because I was trying to do something specific, I felt I can do this because I only need to learn enough to place these tables, because this is the only part I need. And then as I started using it more and more, you start to realize, okay, well, the reason it is so hard to learn is because it can do so much. It's such a powerful tool. Yeah.
Yeah, but it takes hours and hours and
Yeah.
hours of playing with it to really flush it all out. But like you said, when you do, you're like, oh, I can do this and I can do
Yeah.
that. Like I found that with certain like programs where like I first look at it, I'm like, oh man, maybe I'll just shut that and come back to it later on another day when I've got 5 hours to stare at it, you know. So yeah. So it is a beautiful magazine or zine though. It looks beautiful, and I love that the cover is always so unique. Like, how do you guys come up with what's going to be on the cover of this thing?
Well, the first few were just like Logan had just kind of picked something, because at the start I was just doing layout, and so I would just put that together, and then like notice that something was misspelled, go in and fix that, and then that whole thing just starts to kind of grow, and eventually you're doing more. It seems like everything that I do is like that, where you get snared in by something, and then you're
in the belly of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But he would just kind of pick them, like on volume 1 issue 3. That's Supper Club, a local band. Logan's really into local music, and so we got this guy Javier Madrigal used to do a lot of photos for us. He hasn't sent us anything for a while now, but he's a neat guy, and I think actually I was taken by Shepard McCollum. It's not, so I'm misremembering. But anyway, we used a couple of his photos. And then there's this local artist who's really good, Haley Blanco, and she did this beautiful drawing of a witch, and she didn't do it for us. She just did it. And Logan knew her. I think he had met her in a coffee shop once or something. Logan knows everybody. Running a game store, like, he ends up just talking to everyone for.
Sure.
So, but he asked her if we could use it, and she said yes, and people really liked that issue. Like, anytime we put like cartoons on the front, people seem to pick it up more.
Yeah.
And when we did the first few issues of volume 2, we were just doing pictures of local people that. I don't know. I think the idea was that here are some people doing cool things in the Tri-Cities. If we could kind of help highlight that, maybe that would be kind of help people see what we were trying to tell them about the area. So the very first issue of volume 2, which is the first one that we did in this great big tabloid format with color, was Dara Quinn. And I brought every single issue actually. So this is the very first issue of volume 2, and you can see Logan did all of this layout. I designed this free thing. That was my contribution. Thank you. But back then our logo was different, and we put the dates sideways, and we used to put like text on the front saying what things are. And if you were trying to like actually succeed with a magazine or something, you would be doing this. We don't do it because it's prettier when you leave that off. And this probably will flop at some point. But now there's a really cool. Someone will find this in a library 30 years from now and be like, oh, they had something neat in the Tri-Cities a long time ago. But we, let's see. Yeah, so the first few were all just photos of people. This is Justin Frick. He's a local filmmaker. He might not be local anymore. I think I might have heard that he moved to Spokane or something.
But he was local.
Yeah. And then this is Arta Marie, and this was taken.
I love that cover.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. I like that it's turned sideways, and the guy that took this, he uses real film. So when you see this weird orange thing, that's not an artistic distortion. No, that's like it developed incorrectly. But that's what it makes it kind of.
It looks really cool though.
Yeah, and that's David Valadares did that, and he's kind of a eclectic art person himself. And then think, what did we do? Issue 4, we did something different. Is the sorry, probably pauses are great for.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The just the audio is like, they're like, oh, where'd they go? No.
Yeah, you can. Do you edit the podcast?
If the only time I do any edits is like, stuff at the beginning, at the end.
If someone drones
yeah,
on about
it just-
nomic for 20 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But you could probably, people would probably be grateful for you cutting
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Issue 4, we did Tatiana Rexia. She's, you know about Out and About
Mm-hmm.
over here in East Pasco?
Yeah.
Like the only gay bar in the Tri-Cities
Mhm.
and like kind of the only one in the region. I don't think Yakima has, Yakima might have just gotten one, I can't remember, but I think the next nearest one was Spokane.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, but local drag queen, and she does this cool stuff where, or she, he, pronouns get messed up, but half skull thing, and folks seem to like that. So then when we did the fifth one, I forget what we did after that. Oh yeah, okay. The fifth one, have you ever seen these books? These are paperbacks that were really big in the early 80s. Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Choose Your Own Adventure is that is a trademark, and the company that owns that trademark defends it very vigorously, as they should. But to avoid being sued into oblivion, we called it Select Your Own Narrative.
Good choice.
Yes. So we use this really cool Benguiat font.
Yeah.
Because I made this to be as similar to the covers of those books as possible. And actually I used, I think the one I used as my template was Space Patrol. And it has like a little balloon in the corner, and then I had to go find like a public domain image of a balloon from the 1800s. So that, and then I colored it in
Love
the
them
vector.
public domain sites.
Yeah. But that's where this logo came from, and then I liked the way it looked so much that we just kept going with that. With it, yeah.
One.
And see, then the next one we ran, timing on this was great because this came out when Pride was going on. We have I think the proper name for it is Mid-Columbia Pride. But they did it in John Dam the year that this was out.
Okay.
And I forget where I was going with that. But the art is by Haley Blanco.
Okay.
And then we kept that font and started using it a bit more for other things. And back then we were pretty reticent about using a word like liberal on the front because for both me and Logan growing up, that was an epithet that your parents spat with disgust.
Yeah.
And part of the reason that we started using, part of the reason that we started with pseudonyms.
Sure.
And then from there...
but clearly that kind of, resolved itself if you're moving in that,
Yeah, get
direction.
more and more open about things. And I guess that's what we want to encourage too,
Right.
is because the neat stuff that's going on in the Tri-Cities, the alternative stuff, the weird stuff is it's always been here, but nobody talks about it because a lot of people don't want to hear about it. And so this was when I was younger, this was very, very discouraged, and I'm sure it wasn't in every social circle, but for the people I was surrounded by, this stuff was not okay.
Yeah.
So we're trying to kind of push back on that.
Yeah.
And today, anyway,
Which is incredibly brave, I have to say.
Shucks, thank you. So today we, this has kind of become our standard now. This was our I love this one. This is our December cover. Giant skeleton zombie radioactive Santa Claus climbing out of the cooling tower at Hanford. Columbia River visible in the foreground there.
Yeah.
This is another Haley Blanco piece.
Is
This one we actually we were like, can you draw this?
Oh, so
And-
it had a concept and
and because all of the others are her original. Actually, no, I take that back. The one of the this is a alternate history version of the Tri-Cities where there's a elf and a werewolf sharing a joint under. I think this is supposed to be the Blue Bridge because you can see the cable
Right.
bridge in the background, and there's a giant tentacle monster
That's
coming out of the river. Yeah.
Nice.
But I believe that Logan and her developed this,
Right.
and then
And
this
then that one.
yeah, and then we made that. And by the way, we're not in any way anti-nuclear. In fact, one of our board members is a nuclear engineer. Like, we're
go.
very, very pro-nuclear, and there's a
Yeah.
whole thing in the editorial about
Sure.
that. And then
But you get to still have fun with it, right?
oh yeah,
You
yeah.
have the idea of it.
I think what we said there was that it's our feeling is that it's okay to embrace nuclear power's pop culture baggage as long as we recognize that it's only fun kitsch with little basis in reality. So there's
Perfect.
no danger of meltdown.
Yeah. Everything is good.
Yeah. This was our January
Right.
cover. And this is again Tatiana Rexia, and that's Sugar Woodward, and that's Jay Chavez. And he runs Pride and the gay bar Out and About, and then these are two of the drag queens that perform there. And you can see we started doing the top in white, and we just
Right.
carried on with that.
Right.
And
There's the
then
newest one.
this issue, very sad. Logan had this gigantic Irish wolfhound Charlie, who was amazingly almost 15 years old, which is truly ancient for a dog that size. They
Yeah.
don't normally live that long.
Yeah.
But he was kind of the mascot of Adventures Underground. And actually, if you walk by that part of the Uptown, there's a mural painted on the outside wall of a dragon, I think with a horde, and there's a wingback chair that Charlie is curled up in the mural.
Oh.
But Charlie died in January. So we had passed a resolution in our nomic saying that Logan had to make the cover for this issue.
Yeah.
And so, but this is what he came up with, and I really like that. I thought this was perhaps this might be my favorite cover. I
That is
don't know,
so
there's
awesome.
some really good ones. Yeah.
I liked it before, but now I like it even more. My heart is just like, oh.
Sorry, I don't mean to go through
No.
a show and tell.
No,
of
I
every single-
love it. I love it because, like I said, the bringing it all together is such a creative, but it has to be structured. Like, there's such a big mix of the two when you're looking at all those different things and the layout aspect of it. So yeah, it's really cool. Thank you. So, you put these out monthly now, yes? Very good.
Yep. Try to aim for the first Friday of every month, but sometimes it's ahead or back a week, depending, like because the days fall weird. So if the 29th of a month is a Friday, we'll probably put it out on that day instead or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how many locations are you guys at?
It's, off the top of my head, I don't know, but a whole bunch. We're
I
at,
saw them at Lotus of the Moon, and then like Green to Go, and then I know I've seen it somewhere else too. But
we run this feature now in every issue on page 13, one of our color pages, where we list all of the top ones, like Tommy's Tap House, Emerald of Siam, Umpqua Bank. Our bank made the foolish decision of letting us distribute there. So
there you go.
Out and About, Paper Street,
Right.
all these great places.
Awesome.
But we're distributing to about I think probably around 60 places locally now.
Good.
Some of them it's just barely. Some of them we only drop off 10 copies a month.
Yeah.
But if we can get 10 people to read it, then it's great. The tattoo parlors we take to a lot, coffee houses, pot shops, these kinds of things. Then we mail it to a whole bunch of places, doctors' offices and stuff who probably just throw it away, but who knows? You might go into an
never
optometrist
know.
someday and see it on the counter.
Yeah.
We're distributed in the Tri-Cities, West Richland, Benton City, in Prosser. Prosser was the first kind of further away place that we expanded to. We're out there. We're at Altitude and the Bake Shop, the Princess Theater, the Prosser Record Bulletin, which is their paper. I don't think it's a daily though, but they're distributing it.
Nice.
And then we're now being distributed in Desert Air at a Hotspot Mini Mart. There's a whole bunch of liberal people out in Desert Air. I had no idea. I would have thought that was a jacked up pickup truck country. But it's not.
Well.
And we're now we just started talking to a lady who's very interested in distributing in Walla Walla for us, which is
Very good.
because Logan and I do all the distribution right now, so we have to drive to all these places, and it's very time consuming. So we had not been going to there. Like, we would love to go to a bunch more places, but like, this thing is operated on such a shoestring budget, and it loses money like crazy. Like, it's I ran a thing on the financial statistics for it in the December issue, and it's or maybe it was January, but it's about half of it is just us putting money into the thing, and then the other half is a combination of subscriptions, our Patreon, and advertising, and which have been essential. If we did not have those things, if nobody stepped up to say they had some amount of confidence in it, we would have given up on it. But we actually have a few advertisers, and we're incredibly grateful for their help. Oh boy.
So you guys, but you can also get it online, right?
Yeah,
Not just like
tumbleweird.org.
Yeah.
And actually, we just we just had a board meeting this last Saturday, and we enacted a rule that had. Sorry, I love talking about nomic, because I really like thinking in terms of rules and algorithms, because it makes things so understandable. Yeah. But it is not interesting to other people usually.
Well, you have my attention.
But there's a digital version, and I think I'm sure we're probably the only local publication doing this. There's no advertising on our website. There's no banner ads or anything. We don't track anybody. The digital version that we put out, it is the same file. Well, actually, we do a per page file with the printer, but it is all of those compiled into one PDF, because I do the layout, and the layout's really important to me, because you can disassemble it and put it on individual web pages and have it be more accessible and searchable and stuff. Right. But I really want people to see it a certain way, so we use the PDF format, and we just ratchet down the quality a little bit so that it's a manageable size. Otherwise, it ends up being. It would be several hundred megabytes, and then if we bring it down a bit, but my rule of thumb is it has to be 30 megabytes or smaller for people to carry. And even then, it amazes me. We have right now about 1,000 people a month downloading the PDF, which I am amazed by, because it is not friendly. If you're reading it on your phone, you're going to be scanning back and forth constantly, because the pages are so huge. The pages are 10.5 by 14.5 inches.
I didn't try opening it up on my phone, just on my computer, so. Anyways, this is not a good model for publication. If we were trying to make this like commercially successful, you would not go about it in this way. We try and adhere to try and keep things open and transparent as much as possible. So everything on the website is
made that way. We use a very clean RSS feed for pushing out updates, which we do infrequently because I also think that you shouldn't try and clutter up people's feeds with things.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that the way that you're going about it is completely appropriate for, where it's at right now, like you're trying to stay true to what this is and then still like give out the information and just make it available to people. Just that alone, just having it sitting there, it's just available to whoever might pick it up. So it's really cool.
You do your podcast the same way, because I went and downloaded it and it's a nice clean interface with no junk.
I know.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you. Right on. Well, Henry, I'm so glad that you came and you got to show us all of the ins and outs of Tumbleweird, and I've enjoyed this process so much. So again, thank you. And it's tumbleweird.org that people can find everything.
Yep.
Is that right? Okay.
Everything at tumbleweird.org.
Perfect.
And,
so whether you're reading or submitting or whatever, you'll find all of the information there.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me on and for letting me ramble on and on about these weird esoteric things that pretty much only I find interesting.
I think that you'd be surprised. So many more people are interested in it as well. Awesome. Thank you all so much for listening. If you would like to help support Unraveling with Rayne, go to patreon.com/unravelingwithrayne. When you become a patron, you receive bonus content such as behind-the-scenes footage, along with other special content that you won't be able to find anywhere else. Music for Unraveling with Rayne was provided by Barefoot Randy. Studio space was provided by Moody Logic.